the moves by the central bank governor, John Part 2, of de-dollarizing once more and reverting to the use of a monocurrency, a mono-local currency, is a disaster, is disingenuous, and it's absolutely ahistorical and unscientific. The fact of the matter is that we don't have material conditions that can justify the reintroduction of a local currency. The fact of the matter is that it is impossible, given our history, to reintroduce a local currency and make it a standalone currency. The people of Zimbabwe were vandalized and abused by their own currencies. Pensions were lost well in excess of $6 billion. The Justice Smith Commission of Inquiry into the assurance and pension sector of March 2017 established that $5.86 billion worth of insurance policies and values were lost in 2008. Workers lost their income, companies closed, companies were liquidated. So under those circumstances, people of Zimbabwe lost any confidence and any trust in the local currency. The local currency was caught in flagranto, was caught naked. And once a currency has been caught in flagranto, it's not possible. In the history of mankind, there is no country in the world which has been able to de-dollarize after involuntarily de-dollarizing. The only country is Panama in 1904 on extremely different grounds. So, number one, the Zimbabwean public have no confidence in the currency. Number two, the Zimbabwean government have no confidence in the government, in those that are going to implement and execute the attempt to de-dollarize. They have no confidence in John Part 1 and John Part 2. They have no confidence in the government. They have no confidence in Mutuli Ngube. Remember, they tried to do this in 2019. In 2019, they introduced SI 33 of 2019 on the 28th of February 2019. In June of 2019, they introduced the SI 142 of 2019, which made the RTGS the sole currency in Zimbabwe. They introduced later that year Statutory Instrument 212 of 2019. It didn't work. It won't work. The local currency won't work because there's no confidence. Secondly, you also need the requisite macroeconomic environment to sustain a currency. We don't have microeconomic equilibrium in this country. We don't have microeconomic hygiene in this country. We have a government that can't live within its means. We've got a government that is surviving on an expansionary fiscal policy. And when you put money in an economy, too much money chasing too few goods, you have hyperinflation. When you have hyperinflation, you don't have conditions for the introduction of a currency. Broad money, the new government has tried to control it by shielding the ZiG. He has tried to shield the ZiG by making sure that it's unavailable. Now, that's terrible economics. That's madness. You don't control diarrhea by starving yourself. You don't control diarrhea by stitching up your backside. So the ZiG has been protected against the vagaries of the open market through its unavailability. I've never seen the ZiG. I don't know any Zimbabwean who has seen the ZiG and has been able to access it in the open market. But despite that, you still have a parallel market today. Despite that, you still have a parallel exchange rate of 1:40, 1:42 between the US dollar and the ZiG. And once there is oversupply of the ZiG in the market, the rate will shoot with such exponential energy that they will have to devalue that RTGS, that ZiG, or they will have to nicodemously introduce a new currency as they did. Everyone knows that the introduction of the ZiG in 5 April 2024 was a way of removing zeros on the old RTGS currency. But you also know that, ironically, by 28 September 2024, they'd also devalued formally that ZiG currency. So the bottom line is that it's a disaster and it won't work. The economy, regrettably, has been syndicated. The economy, unfortunately, is now owned and controlled by a few cartels and a few cronies. These cartels and cronies are controlling the commanding heights of the economy. They've illegally acquired their assets. They've illegally looted billions and billions and billions of dollars from treasury, from the Republic of Zimbabwe, from the people of Zimbabwe. I was the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. I have hardcore evidence of the billions and billions that were looted using treasury bills that were paid in the form of Command Agriculture. And the biggest beneficiary of Command Agriculture, the biggest beneficiary of monies under the presidential scheme was Secunda Holdings, which received hundreds, literally, of treasury bills in the form of Command Agriculture. The Public Accounts Committee produced a report after Secunda had me fired from Parliament, which showed the huge amounts of money that runs into billions that went into Command Agriculture and that went to Secunda. Part of that report shows huge amounts of money that were not explained, huge amounts of TBs that were not matched by any expenditure. So Command Agriculture is a crime scene. Command Agriculture is a docket on its own, and the first accused person would have to be Secunda. But it's not just Command Agriculture. It's not just the presidential scheme. Millions of dollars were looted through Zupco. Buses were imported. Zupco was loaded. The same characters were involved. The same characters looted. The same character sponsored a law that said, in the name of COVID, commuter omnibuses were no longer allowed, and Zupco was given the monopoly. Years later, they discovered that it was unsustainable. They've abandoned Zupco, and they've abandoned Zupco with millions and millions of debt. Assets in the mining sector have been acquired through companies associated with the same characters. There's a company called Landela Mining. There's a company called Sotic. These two companies have been used to make illegal acquisitions of important mining assets in Zimbabwe, including Bindura nickel mine, including Zim alloys, including Great Dyke and the platinum mine, Great Dyke GDI investments, including mines that were acquired from the Zimbabwe, from ZMDC, mines which were later suddenly channeled and funneled to Kuvimba mine, mines which were suddenly sold back to the government. The $1.9 billion that Mutapa Fund is paying to Kuvimba needs to be investigated. It is paying for what? For what asset, acquired when, by who, and for what consideration. Then you've got these huge contracts, road traffic contracts. On average, it costs $1 million to construct 1 kilometer of a dual carriageway. 1 kilometer. So if you are going to construct 500 kilometers, roughly, the cost will be about $500 million, plus the cost of money, plus charges. It will come to about $700 million. And I'm talking here for, let's say, Harare to Bait Bridge, 500 kilometers of road. So the true cost will be $500 million, representing 500 kilometers. In Zimbabwe, there are companies that are charging $3 million where it is supposed to cost $1 million. It is the same companies, the same cronies, the same tsotsis, the same ziganandas. Trababala's interchange is a byproduct of this looting, of this massive extraction from the government of Zimbabwe. The Trababala's interchange should not have cost more than $40 million. Now, the Minister of Finance goes to Parliament and said it costs $114 million. A forensic audit must be carried out. A judicial commission of inquiry must be carried out. And 3 things need to be investigated. Number 1, where are the bills of quantities that will reflect the true cost of construction? So the true cost of construction need to be verified and established by an independent process that will produce separate and independent bills of quantities. Number 2, was the Public Procurement Act complied with? In other words, on what basis was the contract given to Fossil and the Tagwire consortium that was responsible for the construction? Number 3, what was the true expenditure that was actually incurred? What was the true expenditure that was actually incurred? So a forensic audit must look at the certificates of payment and see whether they match with the work done. Number 4, and most critically, what were the sources of funding? There is evidence, because we saw a government gazette that establishes that there was a loan provided by the contractor of around $80 million. But there's also an evidence that SDRs, special drawing rights, were also used by the government. There's also evidence that treasury resources and treasury TBs were also used to pay this. So there's a clear prima facie case of double or treble financing of the Trababala's interchange. So in order to put the issue to rest, there must be a forensic examination of these 4 issues that I've raised. The bills of quantities, what was the true cost? The tendering process, was the law complied with? The actual cost, what was the actual cost? You measure the work and the certificates paid. Lastly, the funding and the sources of funding and the legalities around funding. And by the way, this same process must also apply to the construction of the patches of the Harare Bulawayo Road, sorry, Harare Bait Bridge Road that they've done, and you'll be shocked by what you will find out. Speaking of treasury bills, you will recall that in January of 2019, around the 19th of January 2019, a treasury bill worth US $360 million was issued to Secunda Holdings, to Kudata Bire. Up to now, no one knows why that treasury bill was given. That treasury bill should have been affected by SI 33 of 2019. A month later, on the 20th of February 2020, the government of Zimbabwe passed SI 33 of 2019 that said all forms of indebtedness, previous indebtedness, had now been converted to the local currency known as the RTGS dollars on a 1:1 basis. At that time, the government of Zimbabwe owed treasury bills that were worth 12 billion US dollars. So creditors and banks had their hair cut, you were the holder of 12 billion US dollars, suddenly you were owing nothing. You were owed nothing because the money had been unconstitutionally appropriated into RTGS dollar. But because Secunda is Secunda, Taguire is Taguire, his US 360 million treasury bill was not converted to US dollars in February of 2019. He then injected this treasury bill into the local market in June and July of 2019, causing the local currency to literally collapse. The Reserve Bank was forced to act. Briefly, his accounts were frozen, but the net result was that suddenly 360 million US dollars was flooded on the local market and the local currency collapsed. Any watcher of the economy, including the IMF, were frightened by that development. So if you have got this individual, this powerful cartel that can destroy the currency within a single day, then the country can be held ransom at any time. Which is why it is crazy to think that this criminal actually has ambitions to be the next president of the Republic of Zimbabwe. It can't happen and shouldn't be allowed to happen. I feel pity for ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF is being reduced to a commodity that can be bought by a few trinkets, a few motor vehicles, a few GD6s. What kind of a country have we become? Herbert Wulshech Tepo is standing in his grave. Joshua Nkabukonkomo is standing in his grave. Dumiso Dabengwa is standing in his grave. The thousands of liberators that died in Chimoyo, Nyadzonya are standing in their graves. For if they knew that the country and their political party was open to the highest bidder, they wouldn't have gone to war. They wouldn't have gone to war. So it's a shame. Shame on ZANU-PF. Shame on ZANU-PF. Shame on everyone in ZANU-PF that you allow yourself to be reduced to a commodity with use value and exchange value. Which brings me to the attempts to amend the constitution. You cannot amend the constitution to remove two limits without two referendums. One to actually deal with the term limits that are provided for in terms of Section 328. And the second referendum to make sure that when the amendments are made, they benefit you. So ZANU-PF can't make these amendments without these two referendums. Fortunately, the majority of people in ZANU-PF, as a matter of fact, are opposed to this amendment. Fortunately, 99% of Zimbabweans are opposed to this amendment. We will fight this. We will defend the Constitution.